Hey everybody, welcome back. Today we're going to play a second round of a game that I like to call How Realistic Is This Game? You might recall a couple of weeks ago we looked at the game Battleship and we tried to compare it to what a real life battleship war would be like. And we found out that it actually isn't that close. And so there's a lot of games that we play a lot. And we want to analyze them and look and see how close they are to real life. And so the game we're going to look at today is called Clue. This is an older version of the game, and they change it around a lot because they want to keep you buying it so you don't use the same ones that you've had in your house for 20 years. But basically, if you've never played the game, the premise is there's a murder. And the murder takes place in a house, a mansion of some kind, and you have to figure out who murdered the person, and you have to figure out who did it, what they used to do it, and where they did it. So right away, it's kind of strange because that, like, really pretty much who did it is what you're after in real life. Where it took place, usually that's kind of easy because especially if it's in a house, it would be where the dead body is. It's kind of strange. Like, why would you want to? Well, this is good and all. We know who murdered him and we know what they did it with. But the real question is, where did he do it? Well, I don't know. I don't know if that's a really important question. But it is in this game because that takes up most of your time. So let's run through it. Clue, you have a host of suspects here with the unlikely names of Miss Peacock, Miss Scarlet, Colonel Mustard, Mr. Green, Professor Plum. Here's Miss Peacock in the back. And you want to figure out which one of these people was the murderer. Now, the first time I played, I try to play games as smart as I can, try to relate them to real life, right? So I'm not trying to profile anyone, but the reality is if you look at statistics, most murderers are men. And so what a lot of people do when they first play the game is they immediately just shoot Mr. Green, Colonel Mustard, and Professor Plum because they know one of those is probably the murderer. But in this game, it turns out that that's not always the case. So let's take a look at it with a little more specificity, because the game actually starts with a confidential case file. And inside this confidential file is the answer to the mystery. In here is who did it, what they did it with, and where they did it. And this case is placed on the board. This file is placed on the board in the middle. And at the end of the game, to determine if you got the right answer, you get to go to the middle and then open the case file. Now, a couple of things here. In real life, this would be extraordinarily helpful for the police if there was already a file that had the murderer and all of the other accompanying information in it. That really doesn't exist. But in Clue, it does exist, and it's right there in the middle. And your task, you would think, right, that you would think your task would be to get this file and open it up, because usually when I play, I head there first. Because if you can get there first and you can look at that file, you're at an extreme advantage to all of the other competitors because they don't know who did it. Now, some players won't let you do that. They'll want to follow the rules and whatnot. And then if you follow the rules, you have to look at it at the end. But there it is. Now, an interesting thing is that what you're trying to do is not look in the file and see who did it. You're actually trying to guess who didn't do it, and you're trying to ask other players who they know didn't do it as well. And so you're trying to solve the mystery by the age-old process of elimination. Now, I don't know how many police officers solve murders that way. It really doesn't work very well in real life. One of the reasons is they actually give you these nifty little notepads, and they have a notepad, and you actually have your own notepad like a real detective, and it has a list of all the suspects and a list of all the weapons and a list of all the rooms. And it's one of those suspects. So in real life, you might say, I don't know if that would hold up in court. You might say, well, the murderer is Mr. Green because, the evidence points to Mr. Green. And in court, they might say, aha, but did you consider that an outside intruder may have broken into the house and murdered the victim? Well, no, because on my pre-printed notepad, outside intruder is not one of the options. So that's why you can use the process of elimination to try to figure out who the murderer was. Again, I don't know if it would hold up in court in real life, but that's what you can do. Now, one of the things you have in Clue that is the most fascinating part is the weapons, because they actually give you little replicas of the weapons, not just a card, not just a board game, it's a tiny little replica. So here you have a revolver. A revolver could be a murder weapon. That's one of the murder weapons, because I guess a musket was not available. And then you have the knife, which is a classic murder weapon. You have a lead pipe. This always fascinated me because it's bent, and I always assumed it was bent because you cracked it over somebody's head. But then as I got older, I started thinking, it's like, dang, if you cracked somebody over the head with a lead pipe so hard that it bent, what's that guy's head made out of? Titanium? This is the weirdest one, a wrench. I don't know exactly how you kill anybody. I guess you could hit them in the head like a lead pipe, but maybe they use the wrench to, I know, they probably use the wrench to cut off the plumbing, and then there'll be a backup, and then amoebic dysentery will eventually take over. This is another interesting here, the candlestick. This is a candlestick, and I guess you can hit somebody over the head with this candlestick and murder them. You may not be familiar with the candlestick as a murder weapon, because actually, statistically, candlestick murders are down 1,000% since 1865 Victorian England. I don't know if you know that. We have the rope, which I gather is not a direct weapon, but you can tie somebody up and then beat them with a candlestick. And then we have, of course, the dog, which I guess you can give the dog rabies, and if he bites the victim will eventually die, take about 6 weeks. We have the hat. I don't know how you kill somebody with a hat. Maybe you can line the rim with poison, perhaps, and it can seep into, I don't know. I'm thinking that some games may have gotten mixed in with my Clue game. I don't know. But here's my favorite weapon, of course, the destroyer. That'll do the job. Well, what you have is you got to figure out which one of these weapons and which one of those murder suspects killed the victim, who you don't even know who is the victim anyway. They call him somebody named Mr. Body. He doesn't have a picture. He doesn't have a portrait. You don't know anything about him. I think that's horrible to dehumanize the victim like that. I think victims' rights, that should be the most important character in the game. But in this game, it's like, who cares? You're only interested in the suspect. So I don't really appreciate that very much. You go around this house, and of course, this house is just like every normal house. It has all the rooms you would have in a normal house, like a billiard room, because everybody has a billiard room. Some people would call it a pool room, or a garage where you have your pool table, or what most of us call it, which is a room in somebody else's house. You also have, I don't know about this one, the conservatory, which actually could be one of two things. It could be a place where you keep plants, or it could be a place where you practice music. I don't know which one it is, because we never really had these growing up. Even in Mount Pleasant, where people have their own garages for their own golf carts, I don't think people have conservatories. It's just not something. Mom, did you see my flip-flops? Well, did you look in the conservatory? I believe the last time you had your flip-flops on, you were in the conservatory, fertilizing the plants and practicing your cello. Check that. That's just not something you hear a lot. They do have, one of the interesting rooms that I always was fascinated by is the hall. Well, how's that a room? Like in my house and every other house I've been in, the hall is just a place where you get to the room. So how is the hall a room by itself? Obviously, we are dealing with a whacked up system of culture here, where people have hallways for rooms, they're using candlesticks for murder weapons, and the way you solve a crime is by checking out a file that already has the answer in it. So as you can see, I don't think I have to belabor the point. Clue is not really like real life. I don't think this is how they solve mysteries in real life, and I know because I've solved a number of them. And so I guess in the final analysis, when it comes down to it, the people who made the game Clue didn't really have one. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you tomorrow. Stay negative for Corona. Do your work. Let me know if you have any questions. And hopefully I'll see you guys soon.